President Donald Trump prides himself on being a deal maker, a negotiator, and this was one of the many concerns that some of us had before he came back to office. Specifically, one of the concerns was, will he try to make a deal with the worst regimes in the world, as he did previously. And in this case, yeah, he has been negotiating with Iran, as we know, for several months now. It's not going exactly as he would have expected. It's going kind of a bit more like we would have expected, as in Iran is standing its ground. They know what they're doing and what they want to do. And Trump wants a deal. So Iran, of course, America can present all sorts of red lines, like you can't enrich uranium at all. And Iran can say, well, our red line is we can enrich uranium. And Trump will still say the negotiation is going well. So the latest news, and this is a report yesterday in the New York Times, is that Trump is looking at an interim deal. Now, an interim deal, we of course are not at the table. They're not inviting us, and we probably wouldn't accept the invitation. But an interim deal would probably be something, for it to be something that Iran agrees to, it has to not prevent them from enriching uranium. So what would the interim deal really prevent? Well, the one thing that Iran really wants to prevent, which is an Israeli strike. This will undoubtedly be something that they will say, this is our red line. If we're negotiating with you, your allies cannot target us. So Iran wins, we lose. Big surprise. Yeah, welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Jonathan Honig, Daniel, and first time panelist Nicholas Provenzo. Nicholas, I'm going to go to you first. Thanks for joining us. Your thoughts on this latest development or on the negotiation in general?
Well, I think it's just part and parcel of, I guess you could say, 50 years of disastrous policy and appeasement towards Iran. And, we have to ask ourselves, why are we even here dealing with a theocratic regime with nuclear ambitions? And I think it's because of the complete and utter abdication of our right to self-defense and our willingness to call a spade and condemn Iran for what it is. Our words are empty. They're not backed up with any action, and as a result, we've given Iran the opportunity to exploit our weakness for going on, 2 generations. So, I mean, should we be negotiating with them in any way? How would I negotiate with someone with a gun to my head, a murderer who screams death to Nicholas? Oh, let's talk about it. We can just work it out. I mean, maybe in a very limited sense, like please don't shoot me or something like that. But that only signals weakness, and a nation should never signal that. So I'm just stunned just thinking about it, how bad it's been and how bad it's been for generation. And I think after 9/11, when Leonard Peikoff wrote his famous, how to end states that sponsor terrorism essay, I was on board and thought he nailed it right on the head. Iran is a ruthless proponent of violence, uh, and I was, I was thinking about it as prepping up for the show. I mean, it goes back to the Saddam Rushdie fatwa, where you had this theocratic regime threatening the ability of someone to speak freely. And rather than see that as an existential threat, the United States abdicated. I mean, it moaned and groaned. And then, most recently, the attempted assassination, I got to pronounce this, Masia Ali Nazid, this brave Iranian dissident who's headquartered in the U.S. I think she's out of Brooklyn. The Iranian regime sent assassins to assassinate her. How did the U.S. respond? They treated it like a criminal justice matter. So, there was a trial, and a lovely trial at that. There were convictions, but it didn't see a foreign government sending assassins to American soil as an act of war. Well, what is it then? I mean, so our policy is so incoherent. I marvel at how we could even recover for it. Like, let's say you elected an objectivist to sit as president. How would they handle it? Just dealing with the 50 years of nightmare and trying to reorient the country towards a proper moral stance. I mean, it'd be a tough sell. So it's just I'm staggered at how bad it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, as somebody else they allegedly apparently tried to assassinate is Trump and also
Yeah,
Netanyahu through Hezbollah. He has a short memory, so had they done that when he's in office, maybe he would have responded differently. But yeah, if somebody says death to Nicholas, and you think how do I negotiate with him? The middle ground would be Schrodinger's Nicholas. But when it's a country and they say death to Israel, death to America, you could say, okay, how about one? Or, to half the people. Yeah, that is, I don't have a better explanation than that. Then again, I would not be negotiating with them. Jonathan.
Well, and the thing is Iran is weak, and Ayn Rand identified that. She wrote, this is from Galt's speech from Atlas Shrugged, reprinted in the New Intellectual. I saw that evil was impotent, that evil was the irrational. Can you think of anything more irrational than theocratic Islamism? The blind, the anti-real, and that the only weapon of its triumph was a willingness of the good, i.e., in my interpretation, the West, to serve it. So the very fact that you'd sit down and have negotiation with people whose stated explicit goal is not, getting to Mars, IPOs on the New York Stock Exchange, making money, creating businesses. It's exterminating a people. It's death to America, as you said, Nicholas. It's like, what kind of conversation, what kind of compromise can you have with them? And the very, in my opinion, act of granting a discussion, granting a compromise, emboldens them. It says, oh yeah, let's keep it up. Let's keep up this death to America talk. It's really getting us places. So, I'm against this notion of compromise, especially with Iran, which, as Razi and I often identify, Ayn Rand isolated in the early 1980s. She said, we're going to be paying for this for decades after the U.S. embassy was overtaken, and we still are. This is now 40 years on, 45 years
45.
on.
Thank you, Bronx Guy Gun Hill Road, for the super chat. Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, so Trump is obsessed with making a deal, but not making a, but in a very specific way, right? It's Iran, make a deal, Russia, make a deal, China, make a deal, Canada, invade, Greenland, invade. Like, this is his like way of like dealing with people around the world, right? And even when it comes to the deal, most of it is made because he screwed up something. Like, when it comes to Iran, he always likes to say, when something happened, it wasn't when he was president, but he already was a president, right? So he could have figured this out. He stepped away from Obama's deal, which great thing, but he didn't set up anything in its place. He didn't set up any future of dealing with the Iranian threat, which led to Americans getting kidnapped on October 7, since Hamas is sponsored by Iran, led to attack on international shipping, including American shipping, by the Houthis, which again, sponsored by Iran, led to Hezbollah attack on Israel, which again, a lot of Americans live in Israel. You have a lot of American citizens, which again was sponsored by Iran. You cannot run away from like responsibilities or from threats just because they didn't happen under your watch. And this is what we keep seeing. Now, when it comes to Iran, on sort of like day one, when he started dealing with Iran, he said he wants a deal, but if the deal falls through, he threatens force. But we don't see any of it. Anytime Iran pretty much says, yeah, we do not want anything, we will not stop enriching. We will stop enriching if you release funds to us, which again is something Trump, I think rightfully so, criticized Biden for, who released the frozen funds to the Iranian regime. And now Will Trump do the same thing? We'll have to see what is in this sort of like interim deal. But if it does happen, uh, remember Biden released about like 6 billion. There in a total, there's about 120 billion. I think U.S. has only about 2 billion. We'll see what happens, but I'm not confident. We are not seeing Trump ever deal with force with the countries that you need to deal with force, like Russia, like Iran, like China. He only deals with force with countries that are closest allies.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a very good analogy because it's amazing. First of all, it's amazing that he would we've spoken about this when it happened, but that he would say, "I'm use of force to take Greenland is not off the table," and saying that is an act of aggression. Just saying that, and yeah, he's not taking it off the table with Iran either. But yeah, you are dealing with a country that is actually an enemy and says that their long-term goal is the elimination of your country, and you're, as we mentioned, trying to find a middle ground. James Valiant says in the chat, Obama's deal was a disaster. Yeah, and Trump acknowledged this. If you can call his criticism acknowledgement, and now
Well,
he's
he
offering.
stepped away from it, right? What more than criticism there is?
Yeah, and
It's
now he
just
is offering the same, if not better for Iran, as in worse for humanity. Nicholas.
I was just trying to figure out if he had actually been as clear on Iran as he was with Greenland. And I can't recall him, I mean, pretty clear on Greenland. And well, why? Because Greenland's weak and would never do anything to initiate violence against anyone. And Iran is more prickly and typical Trump. He only likes to pick on the weak. Um, I I ask myself why the American people tolerate this. And the throwaways, well, ultras American, but more nuanced. Why do we have successive administration after administration? Obama was appeasement and cash. Trump, talk tough, but actually no action. Biden negotiation posture. Trump too, a negotiation posture. Why do the Americans tolerate it? And that I find a baffling question because I mean, I grew up remembering, when Carter was president, I was what, fifth grade, something like that, sixth grade. Um, People detested Carter for his weakness, and that was one of the things that brought Reagan into the White House. And yet, subsequently, what do we have? Appeasement after appeasement, weakness after weakness, and a emboldened Iranian regime that's continues to pursue nuclear weapons.
I mean, can I throw out one idea? I mean, I think you guys, you Europeans, might have a different perspective of this, but I think, Nicholas, there is a sense of actually multiculturalism. I mean, and Trump has alluded to this in some of his speeches, a sense of like, hey, you guys want to have Islamic theocratic states? That's cool. You got your thing.
Yeah, and that's so bad. I agree. Absolutely.
And we've got our thing. And hey, it's like, no, that's retarded. That is third world. That is, that is backward. It is old fashioned. It should be long retired. And
it was horrible how he abdicated in Saudi Arabia the last 2 weeks or something like that, where, you've been so beautiful, we'll never impose our values on you. I wouldn't even dream of it because you guys are such a beautiful,
our values.
Cringing, what are our values? Individual rights. You want to wear a veil, wear a veil. But if you don't want to wear a veil, you're free not to. And that's what Islamism doesn't tolerate. And he's sitting there singing odes to it. It was disgusting. And so it just shows how bad it is.
Yeah, and yeah, Jonathan.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I do think that there's a sense of like, we're sick of hearing about it. We're sick of hearing about wars. And Trump sees compromise. This is my opinion. Trump sees compromise as an opportunity to, at least in the short term, because compromise is always a short term, to kind of get maybe the war off the front page, to claim a victory, and with no knowledge or history of what compromising with evil ultimately does. And I've mentioned it before. I'll mention it one more time. John David Lewis's book, Nothing Less Than Victory.
Yeah.
Also, Winning the Unwinnable War, Ilan Journo's collection of essays. Islamic totalitarianism is not a metaphysical fact of reality. It doesn't always have to exist, nor should it exist, because it is third world. But it has to be, in my opinion, dealt with appropriately, and it's not by negotiations and agreements and kumbaya moments.
I think he would be infinitely better served if he would just stand up and support the dissidents in Iran, and just, again, give them some moral air, give them some moral strength and support.
Yeah.
Just by saying, I think what they're doing is wonderful, and I hope and wish for their every success. Just those words alone would breathe a lot of fire into that movement and allow the Iranians to save themselves rather than the U.S. have to do the dirty work.
Yeah, and we'll talk a bit more about the dissidents and the potential for Iran that Trump is really ruining the potential. If there's any totalitarian regime in the Middle East that there is hope for, because of where the population currently is, not philosophically, then philosophically, it is Iran. But we are undermining that. Somebody in the chat, one of our regular trolls, says this is an anti-Trump channel. You guys are actively undermining the president. This is in the context of the United States. This is a massively pro-America channel, and if Trump undermines America and what's good for America and the rest of the world, we will call him out on that. And if he doesn't, like I say, I hope that we will be praising Trump daily. That's what I want to do. But he has to do the right thing for us to get there. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening.
I still think the whole thing in the first term with the dictator of North Korea, the big thing with him where they had a confab, and it's like, you would sit down, like, Rand talks a lot about sanction, and for Trump to sanction evil goes a long way. And it's like, it doesn't cost, there's no cost to it, but like, it doesn't have a material cost, but like, he really costs the US so much when he sanctions evil, when he sits down with evil, when he, as Nicholas pointed to, denigrates the American values that make America unique. What makes America is not the Mississippi River or the Grand Tetons. It's the ideas. Same thing with Israel. The water in Israel isn't so different from the water in the rest of the Middle East.
I mean, it's holy, but anyway.
It's the ideas. Ideas move the world, and
right.
Iran's got some effed up ones, in my opinion.
Daniel,
and that just makes the moral abdication a little more painful, because, again, just a moral stance alone could dramatically shift the movement here. One of the things I've been struggling with was, okay, let's say that an objectivist was serving as president, and that objectivist took the position that they were going to act ruthlessly towards the Iranian dictatorship, theocracy, and eliminate it, as Leonard Peikoff called 25 years ago. What next? And that's the problem that I struggle with, because on one hand, I'm very aware of, like, John David Lewis's really great examination of the American occupation in Japan, and how America took a militaristic religious state and turned it into modern Japan by imposing a constitution upon it. We let them keep their emperor, so they were motivated by that. But within that, the emperor was no longer divine. The emperor was no longer a political force. He was a figurehead, and you had an imposed free country on Japan, which was beheading people and suicide, attacks against American ships during the war. So a ruthless and determined enemy. And I look at Iraq, and I look at that fiasco, and I ask myself, what was different? Why did we fail in Iraq to establish something worth keeping and fighting for? And what does that mean for the future in Iran? I think there's one view that says, leave them to their own problems, just eliminate the force against you. And that's attractive to me. But then there's the problem of what comes after, if that's even worse than what we have now. And I was wondering what you guys thought about that, because that's the issue that I really struggle with.
Well, The Daniel fans are unsubscribing en masse, so I do have to go to Daniel next. Daniel, your thoughts?
Uh, well, I'll cover the sort of the question of what is next. But I had a few more things people are talking about. People are yelling TDS in the chat and sort of, we are anti-Western because we criticize like Western leaders. Again, politicians are not, they didn't get to their office because of some unique ability they have, some unique achievement they did. We voted them in to act on our behalf, and we should criticize them until they go away, because that's what they are for. They are public servants, and they should you should always criticize them. There is no politician that is good enough. If somehow Trump does something in Iran or does something good, we should demand more. Why should there be like a satisfactory level of like, okay, this politician has done something, so now he can just go away? No, this is not a position where this is not like a CEO of a company. You're a public servant. You are basically a slave of the people, and you should work on our behalf. You are not some kind of king who is like enjoying a privilege of being like a head of state. If you do not want to do this, get the hell out. You can resign. You don't have to take this office if you don't want to do what is necessary, if you don't want to do what you need to do.
And Daniel, not to interrupt you, but like, we're not sycophants. People always say, "Oh, Ayn Rand objectivist, you guys are all cultists," but actually we're not. We evaluate people by what they say and do, by their ideas. And not to put words in your mouth, but when it comes to President Trump, we're going to evaluate his ideas, his perspectives, his actions on everything, including Iran.
Yeah, a couple of things, Daniel. First of all, I wouldn't say the slave of the people, but he is a servant. Like, slave can't quit his
I
job.
don't like
So,
slave either.
um, but yeah. Also, there was one person in the chat that said we're anti-Western, and that person is pro-Hamas. So I'm not sure I'll exactly, take them at their word. But
Words that
Nicholas,
don't
you
mean
you
it
mentioned
anymore.
you mentioned earlier that Carter was despised for his weakness, and this isn't the case with Trump. The thing with Trump is, uh, whatever appeasement he does, he talks tough, and we were talking about this on the Daily Objective, how in some social media, let's say, and increasingly in like even legacy media, not only is a picture an argument, but nothing other than a picture is an argument. And Trump is a picture of strength somehow because he talks tough, and he embarrasses people in photo ops in the White House, and stuff like that. And we have gotten to a point where making a rational argument in response to a meme is you know uh, futile.
Well, that happened with Obama, where Obama wasn't anything that he actually stood for. It was the image, hope, whatever that means. And that he was able to turn himself, brand himself in this disconnected way that nevertheless resonated. Trump has achieved the same thing. And the fact that both of them have in different directions just speaks to the argument that there's something seriously defective with the American psyche in terms of being able to evaluate these leaders objectively, because I thought that Obama was reprehensible for his policies and actions. I feel that Trump is reprehensible for his policies and actions, but both of them have successfully branded themselves in this disconnected way. I mean, how Trump is a symbol of strength is beyond me. I mean, he cowers to authoritarians left and right. That's not strength. That's pathetic. Obama was. I mean, I couldn't even. I couldn't even take half the day to capture everything that was wrong with Obama, and here we are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
Obama did take it next level when he did say, okay, here's a red line, and then that red line was crossed, and he did nothing about it. And regardless of whether you think that red line should have been stated, once you did, you have no choice. Like this, that you have made your choice already, and you can't go back. And going back, there is a price to pay for that, and that's another thing we're paying for. Robert Naser, thank you for being a member for 37 months of the YouTube channel. Robert says, great to see Nicholas Provenzo visiting the panel. I heartily encourage those unfamiliar with his perspective to subscribe to his Substack. Absolutely. And we will, of course, put the link in the chat and in the description. And thank you, Robert Naser, for the super chat.
Thanks, Robert.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I agree on Nicholas's Substack. It's definitely a must read. And, in terms of being advocates for, Western culture, I mean, was there a bigger advocate than Ayn Rand? And, pick up some of her work. I just go back to this idea of, sanctioning evil and compromising in evil and emboldening evil. And the fact that without that, it's impotent. This is, again, my interpretation of Miss Rand's work. Evil is impotent without the West, without the goods willing to compromise and sanction it and feed it. And again, I go back to Trump's meeting with Kim Jong Un, which he seems to revel in. I mean, I remember seeing somewhere that he's got pictures of it. Like he think it's a really cool thing that he sat down and had a photo op with Kim Jong Un. Like a guy who's like set up dissidents with machine guns to be just
artillery. Yeah, there's to blow them up, not just kill them cruelly, and
right, just like and like Nicholas, if you were walking down the street and you got a call and it was like Kim Jong Un's office, he would like to talk with you, would you take the call? I'd say
again, to talk about what? What?
I'm not talking to this. You wouldn't get on the phone with him. You wouldn't get on the phone with him.
Exactly.
And this is this idea of like sanction evil. And I think as our show is titled today, begging for a compromise, begging for a negotiation, begging for a ceasefire with people whose explicit goal is to kill you, is to exterminate you. Like, what do you gain for that? Only evil gains from that. So that's why I'm critical of President Trump in this context.
I think it not to interrupt. I think the problem in America is that America doesn't understand its virtues and it doesn't understand Iranian vices, and it's powerless to see the moral distinction and then assert itself rationally, consistently, and in a way that would make the world a safer, better place. You're talking about Obama allowing the Iranians to cross the red line. What's the red line? No nukes. That's a very good red line. And if you're not willing to stand up for America on that, what is your actual real red line that you would never allow to be crossed? I mean, it just defies description. And yet this is what we've been dealing with administration after administration. So it's a bipartisan failure. I mean, it's not just, the Democrats are the baddies, and if we could only get the right Republican. And no, I mean, you had the whole Bush fiasco after 9/11 and wars that achieved little or nothing at great human cost and at the cost of great treasure.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, and it's not just nukes; it's nukes for a country that states that they want to destroy you. And in the case of Israel, I don't know if you're following the Ayatollah Khamenei on Twitter, but it's like it's almost.
I'm sure it's a massive laugh fest.
Torah Worldwide says in the conversation about banning or blocking trolls, I try to never block. It's like killing chat members. I'm not saying the word you're using for killing that people are now using. Look, no, you don't have to. Like, you don't have to. Look, we keep them around because it's good for the algorithm. Trolls, the more you talk in our chat, the more people hear our perspective, the more people will watch this video. So that's why we keep them around, as long as they don't spam. But absolutely, if you don't want to see that crap, why not? Nobody has a claim on your time because they want to have it. So that's my disagreement with you, but Daniel might have a different perspective or something else to say.
I'm all for everybody should speak. I don't like engaging with trolls. I like taking what they say and using it for the point I was going to make anyway, and just to use that as an example. But we have like people praising Trump, and again, the sort of my biggest problem is oftentimes like I have no idea what like standard people are even using to like say that Trump is a good president. I mean, he's outspending Biden. That's like reality. He's spending more than Biden was last year. That's just the reality. If you wanted to have Trump in to reduce the budget or slash the budget or reduce the deficit or he's failing. So he's failing there. Doge has completely failed. It probably cost more to establish that whole thing that it actually cut in. So we have nothing there. So, okay, maybe we can move on to something else. You want him to like make deals with dictators? All right, that's you. You want peace. If you want, I mean, again, if what America first or America strong means is that we are going to do deals with dictators, then that is not how I view America first. Again, Iran has killed Americans. Russia is helping Iran and the Houthis and has threatened Americans abroad. Russia is interfering in elections. Russia is killing people around the world, killed people inside of the UK. Will happen? Russian like hacker system. I think recently there was a story that both China and Russia are targeting American like infrastructure. This is happening. They are our enemies, and you can like try to ignore that, but it will bite you in the ass in the future. So even like Trump's like trade protectionism, right? He's gonna put tariffs around the world. As soon as the bond market started getting a bit crazy, as soon as the stock market started getting a bit crazy, he even jumped away from his protectionism and he, returned, like made the deal, which was pretty much okay. It's gonna be worse for either side. Thank you for that, I guess.
Um,
To
I
go
want
back to you brought up the polonium attacks in London of the what was he? I guess he was one of their operatives, their intelligence operatives. He defected, and then they did with him in a very public and clear way that this was the Russians disciplining one of their fallen children. I don't understand how the West can tolerate that. I don't. And again, the assassination attempt of the lady in Brooklyn, the dissident in Brooklyn. I don't understand how the world can tolerate that. I don't understand how the world could tolerate Saddam Rushdie year after year, and the actual murders, because as Peikoff pointed out back in the day, Rushdie escaped murder, but his publishers did not. There were people who worked for those printing companies who were murdered, and as a result of publishing Rushdie's books. That's an affront. That's an assault on your core values, the ability to speak freely. And I mean, for me, that's non-negotiable. But for so much of our countrymen and women, it's completely negotiable.
Daniel, I mean, excuse me, Nicholas, I remember after Charlie Hebdo, which I don't know, was at least 10, 12 years ago now.
Right.
Like, and people were like, yeah, you should be able to say anything, but you really should be a little more sensitive. There's always like as if there's some exemption for Islamism that we all know that, some element of complete insanity and third worldism is acceptable.
Well,
I got that when I was in law school. So I actually brought Boss Fawston to my law school. I was going in the early teens, and I wanted him as a speaker. I mean, he's a very provocative, interesting guy. I ran the Federal Society.
Our audience might not know who Bosch is.
So Bosch is an ex-Muslim, Albanian ex-Muslim who lives in the United States and is a cartoonist. And as an ex-Muslim, he was really impacted by 9/11. And basically, he came out trenchantly anti-jihad, trenchantly anti-Islam. And he equates Islam with force. And I think he does so quite eloquently. So his artwork is Muhammad pictures left and right. He just draws it with reckless but principled abandon. And so I wanted to bring him to campus. Well, everybody loved my group and what I was doing before then. And all of a sudden, after that, Nicholas, who, what? Oh, we wish you wouldn't have done that. And it was striking because for me, it wasn't even whether you agreed with Fawston. It's free speech. Once speech gets attacked, it really doesn't matter what the speaker's ideas are. As long as it is speech that you're defending, you have to defend it on principled grounds, because one day it'll come to you. One day my right to speech will be impacted. So I do it for profoundly selfish reasons. So, is how Boss positions himself how I would position myself? Probably not. But that's his stand, and I emphatically agree with his ability to make it. I was radioactive for a year, at least, on campus, because I dared to bring him to speak.
Yeah, the response to we're talking about Charlie Hebdo. The response to that was some march where the title and everybody's banners were like black banners saying "Je suis Charlie," rather than actually holding up cartoons, because that would have been a problem. You're not Charlie Hebdo if you're not holding up those cartoons. They were not murdered for the name of the of the magazine. They were murdered for showing Muhammad cartoons. And yeah, you mentioned Bosch. Bosch won a cartoon contest where there was an attempted terrorist
To
attack.
murder
A
him.
terrorist
To murder
attack.
him.
Now, yeah, now those terrorists were killed. And by the way, Trump at the time said his response to that was they're stupid. Why are they
Why are,
drawing
and that
Muhammad?
was a quintessential
And
American response. Why would
Yeah,
you tickle that dragon? You tickle that dragon because your own rights depend on it.
yeah.
And, again, not that I have a particular desire to get stabbed in the middle of walking down the way, but, without speech, what do I have? Nothing. And I was stunned, but I guess I shouldn't be stunned, but nevertheless, at how problematic that simple gesture of let's defend free speech was.
Daniel,
and,
I
and
want to go back to what I think, and something Nicholas brought up earlier, and something that is not again not a part of this conversation, but should be around Iran, which is the issue of the regime and the population there. And unlike Gaza, the population is not with the regime, or at least many of them are not with the regime, and they are risking their lives. You remember Daniel because you did that fantastic thumbnail of the most watched episode this channel has ever had. The day after the helicopter accident, the episode titled "Iranian President Meets 72 Virgins," where we were talking about people celebrating in the streets risking their own lives to celebrate the death of this person. By the way, at the same time that American students on campus were protesting for totalitarianism, Iranians were protesting, risking their life to celebrate the death of a totalitarian. But this is not a part of the conversation. Even in Trump's threats around the negotiation of, one way or the other, if this doesn't work, there will be military action. It's all about the nuclear facilities, which the nuclear weapons program, which of course is the first priority. But none of it is about, removing the regime and the whole negotiation that Trump says, obviously, because you won't go into a negotiation unless you want it to succeed, but a negotiation that he is so eager to make succeed that he's dropping all pretense of red lines on his side. The end result is saving the totalitarian regime and continuing the oppression of the Iranian people. Daniel, this is an amazing admission in the West for the leader of the free world, but he gets away with it because this is not a part of the conversation.
Yeah, just quickly to mention a little bit more on the Charlie Hebdo, and recently I've started getting more into different kinds of arts, different kinds of like artists, and the idea and cartoonists are artists like any idea. The idea that you would tell an artist like what they can or cannot do, even like a thought of that to me is like so ridiculous because art is so like value oriented. Like you almost cannot be an altruist and like create art because it's like so really disconnect. It's like so connected to values. It's so like sacrosanct and like trying, like not to mention killing somebody, trying to kill somebody over something like that. That's so foreign to like what the West should be, what the West should stand for. And the fact that, yeah, even the leaders in the Western world didn't say, we will hunt down every single person who has any association with these attackers and any governments that even dared to like support this. And instead it was, yeah, maybe you shouldn't, maybe you shouldn't offend these like savage dictatorships. And that is connecting to the point Nicholas made earlier, right? The idea that we like negotiate with these countries, the fact that some like tribes people in Yemen can like bomb international shipping, can like prevent the trade of Western countries that we want to do, and we are still dealing with that. And so that is sort of connecting to, when the Iranian regime falls, what comes after. The big problem is we are not standing up for what why should they want what the West wants? When we took out Japan and when we took out Germany, we showed them, America had ships whose whole purpose was to give out ice cream to the Marines. We destroyed the hell out of those countries because of the might of Western countries. And we showed them this is the only way you can like move to the 21st or to the early 20th century or to like the later part of 20th century. This is the only way. And we are not showing that to Iranians. Like you still have, I think you still have, even in Iran, sort of this admiration of Western culture. But for them, it's just an ideal that is not really there anymore. Like we refuse to really stand up for the ideal that the West stands for. So I think that is a bit of a worry about if Iranian regime takes out. We need to give them an example what to fight for. We cannot just expect them to have their own renaissance when we already had it. We already know what the right values are. We already know what the right ideology is. And trying to put it on them to have the whole renaissance, to have the whole enlightenment all over again, just because we refuse to have a pride to like stand up for it, is again, that's the
Moral
sad part.
surrender that you can't even fathom. I absolutely agree.
I just want to say, Daniel's future biggest fan says in the chat, "This boy is a psycho." Yeah, I can see the future you two have just based on previous trolls turned Daniel's biggest fans. Jonathan.
We need your support. We're here 7 days a week. We're the largest network of information and content that's inspired by Ayn Rand's objectivism in history. And every day we're here commenting. We are all students of Ayn Rand's objectivism and have been for years. And we're trying to inspire you to read her work and interpret the day's events through her perspective. But we need people like Bonnie. Bonnie hit us up with a super chat. So we need your support. We need you to be monthly contributors and practice what you preach. You might not be able to be out there every day advocating for reason, but Rozzy and Daniel and the people who volunteer for this organization are. So support what we're doing with super chats. And Miss Reagan was not, excuse me, Miss Rand was not a fan.
You would not have liked that slip of the tongue, but yeah.
Well, Miss Rand was not a fan of Ronald Reagan, but Nicholas, kind of what you were alluding to in terms of just identifying good and evil made me think of Reagan's Evil Empire speech from 1983. At the height of the Cold War, he referred to the Soviet Union as an evil empire and the focus of evil in the modern world. He asserted that the battle was a conflict between good and evil. And that's, in my opinion, what you don't get when you sit down and say, well, let's have a negotiation because we both know that we're both at fault here and we can come to some common ground in the middle. I mean, that's just the antithesis of this notion of there's right. I mean, isn't Rand's line in the right, there's right and wrong, and in the middle, there's always evil? I'm
Right.
kind of fucking it up, I'm sure. And that's what compromise does.
I agree. Just to go back to the support, I'm a big fan of even small support. Small gestures of support are very valuable. So you guys work hard, you work brilliantly, and I would absolutely encourage the people who watch this show, even if it's a token gesture, because that starts to pile up, it starts to snowball, and light that candle, make the light shine bright. And please do support this channel. You guys are doing a great work and absolutely merit as much support as people can give.
And I should quickly say, PB Law says super chats aren't an option. I don't know why that. Well, we have gotten super chats on this show, but maybe if you're in the US, it could be that Trump is watching and called somebody at Google and said, "Don't let these people get super chat."
Find a way, please do.
Who's more pro-America than Ayn Rand? Ayn Rand is America's philosopher. She is the West's philosopher. She is the continuation of the Renaissance. So it's like anyone says, "Oh, you guys are against America, against the West," like.
No, we want to save America and keep it free and make it freer. And again, that's why it's so important that people really think about how they can support what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and criticizing an American if criticizing an American president is anti-American, then does that apply to criticizing Biden as well when he was in office? I would ask that of Trump supporters. I would say not. We criticized Biden. We also praised Biden right after October 7th, when we actually bought into the nice things he was saying about supporting Israel. And we praised Trump when he did things that we think should be done. And like I said, I would love to be proven wrong and praise him a lot more. Thank you, Christopher, for the super chat. Yes, okay, super chats are working, but the fact that they're not working for everybody is unfortunate, but I don't know how we can fix it on our end.
Try harder.
Daniel.
Yeah, and when it comes to also the support for free people around the world, and especially in Iran, right? Like, that is one country in the Middle East where we know there is actually some opposition. We haven't seen anything in Gaza. We haven't seen anything in West Bank or pretty much anywhere in the Middle East. Iran is the one place where we know there is something. There are people who want something different. There are people who want something different. I don't know. Maybe it is because they, for a little bit, they had like a different system, right? Before the revolution, they had sort of like a Western aligned sort of governments, not necessarily fully democratic, not necessarily fully liberal. They still had ways to go, but they had at least an inkling, or they wanted that kind of system for a while, and they seem to want it back. And imagine if the leader of the free world came out and said, "You know what? This Iranian regime, I Trump already renamed few things on the map. How about like erasing Iran from the map until some legitimate government like comes in place? How about like ignoring their emails, ignoring their phone calls, but basically get rid of their embassy if they have one, and not dealing with them? And calling out the people of Iran that if you stand up to the regime, we'll support you in any way we can. We'll do what is necessary to put you in power if you really want to live in the West, if you really want to live in this Western style, or you want to at least achieve some sort of Western aligned, not the way we deal with Saudi Arabia or Qatar, that just because they have like, we kind of have the same goals, so we ignore the fact that, women are still owned by men, that women cannot even like don't even have like ownership, not only like over ownership over their reproductive rights or anything in that, like ownership of them as a person. Like, they need a man to own them by law. That is still a law in Saudi Arabia, and we are dealing with them as these are our allies, these are people whose values are close to us.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, the country where, as Nicholas mentioned, Trump went and said, "We're not going to preach to you about accepting our values or so on."
And even worse, he stood right next to the crown prince, who had a journalist in America murdered, dismembered. I mean, I was stunned by that. I was stunned by that. If it was my foreign policy, I'd be meeting with dissidents and finding the dissidents and meet with them openly, publicly, so that they at least have a slight chance that they won't get murdered because you've brought in public light to them. So.
Absolutely. Nicholas, I want to read Robert's super chat and then go to you. So thank you, Robert, for the super chat. Robert says, whatever you think of Reagan, and my evaluation is harsher than most, he was a moral political giant compared to anyone on the political scene today, our current president most certainly included. Yeah, Nicholas, you kind of aged yourself with the Carter comment, so I'm going to ask you about Reagan. Yeah, Reagan was one of those moments. I mean, I still say, and I cringe when I say this, that, quarter of a way into the century, the best president America has had so far this century is George W. Bush. That is my opinion. And that is not to say that he was good. That is to say that we have gone downhill since then, and certainly since Reagan. Nicholas, your thoughts on that?
I mean, Reagan's obviously, if you look at him fairly and objectively, he's a mixed bag. On one level, as Jonathan articulated, he was willing to call a spade a spade. He did call the Soviets an evil empire, and for that, he achieved his most grand moments. His mistakes, the Marine embassy, the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut, which was left largely unpunished, he tolerated. He did sit down with the Soviets and try and negotiate various deals on arms control. I forget, exactly
several times.
And so, was he consistent? No. So I think that Ayn Rand was principled in her objections to him, and I absolutely agree with him. But I also agree with the view that he's a giant today. Just, I was listening not that long ago to his speech that he gave after the Challenger disaster. And for a lot of us that old, I mean, I watched it on TV, and it was such an eloquent statement of, the idea of space travel and that hope for the future and respect for that which was lost that day. And the dumpster fire that is Donald Trump, I don't think could deliver a similar speech without mentioning Joe Biden and talking about how Trump is the worst victim that's ever endured anything. So we live in a completely different era in terms of tone, temperament, and whatnot. We live in the era of chum and buckets of chum being thrown in the water to froth things up. That's tragic. And I don't know how we get back, but my hope is that the eloquence of Ayn Rand and people are inspired by her can change the world for the better. I think the
Yeah.
tools are there. I want to be. I'm a shameless fundraiser. I think we need support to get this message out. And so when you have people who are doing it again, like you guys are doing it every day, I'm going to say it again. Please, please, please support these guys in their mission, and they will fight hard for you.
I appreciate that. I agree with it. And Jonathan, I also want to say, we often say on this channel that we're students of objectivism. We're not philosophers. But and we apply it to politics and current events. We're a commentary channel here on YouTube. But we do agree with objectivism. And when we look specifically at, I'm looking at two examples of altruism in practice in foreign policy. The example of what we're talking about on this show, and the example of what Jonathan, you and I talked about on the Daily Objective. So on the one hand, you have again a regime where many people under an oppressive regime are fighting against it, and we, the West, are negotiating on what we can do to keep you in power. Whereas in Gaza, where we saw again no opposition to October 7th, we saw celebrations after October 7th. We are talking about how evil it is to feed them for their victims, to feed them with the wrong kind of food and with having to stand in line. I mean, it's not just that, somebody else's need is automatically a claim on you. It's that specifically of those in need, the claim on you is biggest if they are the most evil and most dangerous to you specifically. Jonathan, your thoughts on that?
I think it's a fascinating observation, and altruism writ large. People still to this day think of altruism as being a good thing. They should take a look at what Miss Rand wrote about altruism, about self-sacrifice, and it's exactly what we're doing and what, unfortunately, President Trump is doing. I mean, Neville Chamberlain wanted peace. President Trump wants peace, and peace at what cost? Peace if it guaranteeing future atrocities, if it's guaranteeing more aggression in the future, then there is no peace. So, read what Miss Rand wrote about altruism. I think that it is what's driving today's, kind of passion for negotiations, passion for ceasefire. And it's too bad because it just guarantees, Razi, as I've said on the channel, many times, it's like I grew up hearing about all of these Islamist groups and their attacks against Israel. And now here we are 40 years later, and nothing has changed among those. Some of the groups have different names now, but their hatred for the West or their hatred for Israel goes on.
The fact that an attack like October 7th was even perpetrated shows just how bad it is, because here it's a completely ham-fisted strategy that requires murdering how many hundreds of people and then inviting retribution and then saying, well, it's so unfair that, there's retaliation here. And what about the poor innocent victims who, again, like as Jonathan said, were dancing in the streets the whole time. And yet to fail to act is no guarantee of peace. So, we actually, for whatever we get by tolerating this, we actually make it worse. And that's what's so benighted about it. And what does it take to convince people how bad it's become and what we need to do to change it, to solve the problem once and for all, like we did with Germany, like we did with Japan?
Yeah, we're a long way away from that kind of clarity. I mean, Trump kind of prides himself on his non-existent relationship with the truth. You know, the first time he won in 2016, he was asked something like, this wasn't exactly the words of the question, but something like, "Do you regret saying all that crap during the campaign?" And he said, "No, why would I? I won." And so it doesn't matter what Trump says. You know, it's not day one of his current term in office, and the Ukraine war is still going on. But so what? He said it and he won. So the mission of that statement has been accomplished, even if the war still continues. Thank you, PB Law, for the super chat. PB Law says, okay, I got the dollar sign. Watch Farewell to Israel. I don't know what that is, but I will look it up. Yeah. I think this channel has been kind of saying farewell to Israel since October 7th, although we again hope we are wrong and that Israel will reverse course overnight so that tomorrow's shows will be much more positive.
Celebrations.
Daniel, parting thoughts, and where can people find you?
Again, remember, this is the West fighting against this dictatorship is not like we are fighting some immeasurable force that we are barely going to destroy, or we are just keep hanging on while destroying. Basically our pinky is on fire and we refuse to blow on it for some reason. Like these, Russia is not able to destroy or do, or barely is able to go into Ukraine. One small country. China will probably collapse as soon as they start try to invade Taiwan. Iran has no defenses right now and hasn't had them for months. Yet we are not, and I am not even talking about Gaza. Yet for some reason, well, not some reason, because of our philosophy, we refuse to stand up for our values and we refuse to do what is necessary. Again, it's simply blowing on your pinky finger. These countries are not serious threat, but they will be if we refuse to fight them, and we will commit suicide in the process of not fighting them.
And where can people find you?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, Damned Dan. The link is going to be in the description.
PB Law also says farewell to Israel is 100% pro-Israel. I don't know what that's in response to, but I don't know it, but like I said, I will also look it up. Jonathan, parting thoughts, and where can people find you?
You read what Miss Rand wrote about multiculturalism. Every culture is not the same. Every culture is not equal. In fact, Western culture, American culture is exceptional. And I recommend a book that I published featuring one of Miss Rand's essays called A New Textbook of Americanism. It's at Amazon, and it demonstrates very briefly and very succinctly why American culture is worth fighting for and standing up for. And that's what I recommend. A New Textbook of Americanism at Amazon.
Somebody in the chat says Razi, the money lover. I mean, when people in Gaza are begging for food, you're okay with that. But you know, the work that we do doesn't. Yeah, I know it's anti-Semitic. I'm just taking it a step further. You know, with inflation these past few years, you know what that has done to the price of foie gras and caviar. I mean, have a little empathy. Nicholas, parting thoughts, and where can people find you?
Well, thanks so much for having me. I think my favorite take on the problem is Leonard Peikoff's speech, "How to End States That Sponsor Terrorism." I'm getting the title wrong, but that's the idea. And that goes back to the objectivist response to 9/11. And I think he nailed it right on the head. I also think that his discussion of the Saddam Rushdie affair is eye-opening, and I would want to steer readers there. You can find me on Substack, Nicholas Provenzo. I will be writing more and more. I have some old articles on why I like Norman Rockwell. And I have 4 or 5 paintings that I think if you look at it, you might become a Rockwell fan too. And I'll be putting that up soon. So by all means, please give me a look. And please continue to support these guys. They definitely earn it. And I so appreciate being a guest on your show. Thanks so much.
Thanks. And yeah, absolutely. Look up Nicholas's Substack. Well, you don't have to look it up because there will be a link in the description. PB Law says that Farewell to Israel is on Tubi. I am on X, Razi Ginsburg. Yep. And I'm also here. We'll be back here tomorrow. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Tomorrow, the Daily Objective and the reality show as usual. We'll see you then.